Treasures from Grandma by Arleta Richardson. Illustrated by Jerde. Chapter 5. Wesley's Lesson. "Sarah Jane, look out!" Too late. She was sprawled on her face, her books and dinner pail in a wide circle around her. "Are you all right?" I knelt down beside her and rolled her over on her back. "Is anything broken?" "It will be if you keep pushing me around," she protested. Slowly she opened her eyes. "We're nowhere near the train tracks, so it couldn't have been a locomotive. What hit me?" Before I could answer, a pudgy face loomed over us. Alarm and concern were written all over it. "Are you alive, Sarah Jane? Can you get up off the ground? Can you see me?" Sarah Jane closed her eyes again. "Wesley," she moaned. "How could anyone not see you? What I want to know is why didn't you see me?" "We were playing tag and Jason was chasing me. I looked back to see how close he was, and when I turned around, there you were. You're lucky I didn't fall on top of you." Sarah Jane shuddered. "Just think of how close I came to saying farewell to this earth." "Sarah Jane, please," Wesley pleaded. "Can't you get up? Can I help you?" Sarah Jane sat up like a shot. "Don't you put a hand on me, Wesley Patterson. You've done all the damage you need to do for one day." Wesley backed off and I helped Sarah Jane stand and brush off her clothes. By this time Miss Gibson had been alerted and she hurried over to us. "Are you all right, Sarah Jane?" she asked anxiously. "Yes, ma'am. I don't think anything's broken." "She just had the wind knocked out of her," Wesley offered. Sarah Jane turned on him. "For your information, Wesley, my wind is what keeps me breathing. There's nothing just about it." "Wesley, pick up her books and bring them in, please," Miss Gibson instructed him. "Come along, Sarah Jane. We'll go inside and sit for a while." "You get my dinner pail, Mabel," Sarah Jane called. "Wesley would have it empty before he got to the schoolhouse with it." "I really didn't mean to knock her down," Wesley said as we picked up the books. "I know," I sighed. "But Wesley, you're so big. You take up more space than the other two upper grade boys together." Wesley nodded miserably. "My pa says if I were a pig, I'd be his prize money maker." "Why don't you try not eating so much?" I suggested. "I've thought of that, but my ma is such a good cook that I don't like to think on it for long." Sarah Jane was still spluttering when I took her things to her. "He could have killed me, and since he didn't, Ma probably will. These are brand new stockings." She stuck her leg out to show me a hole in the knee of one. "I'll be lucky if my skirt will cover the darning. Something has to be done about him." "You can't keep him from eating unless you take his food away," I said. Sarah Jane looked brighter. "No," I protested. "I was only fooling. You can't do that." "I don't know why not," she said. "In the interest of our safety and well-being, I think it's the logical thing to do." "Miss Gibson would never allow it." "I wasn't thinking of telling her," Sarah Jane replied. "This is a personal crusade. You and I can take care of it." "Me? How did I get into your personal crusade?" "Are you my best friend or aren't you?" I had to admit that I was. "Well, anyone who knocks me flat has knocked you flat also," she reasoned. "Share and share alike. Now, here's what we'll do. I'll ask to be excused to go for a drink, and on the way through the cloakroom, I'll take something out of Wesley's dinner bucket. Later on, you do the same thing. If we do that every day until school is out, he may lose some weight. How does that sound?" "Terrible," I said. "It might work today, but if he lost half his dinner every day, he'd howl. Then Miss Gibson would have to find out who was doing it." "I suppose so," Sarah Jane conceded. "But today would be a start." The others came in and we couldn't discuss it any further. Wesley squeezed into the seat in front of us. Most of the students in the room shared desks, but in deference to his size, Wesley sat alone. "He's going to get stuck in there one day," Sarah Jane whispered to me. "And when he gets up, the desk will too. We're doing him a favor." Shortly after the opening exercise, Sarah Jane left to get a drink. When she returned, she took out her slate and wrote, "You won't believe it. He has 3 huge ham sandwiches in his dinner pail." She erased the S in has and put a D in its place. "I took one out. You get another one." About a half hour later, I went out and stuffed a sandwich in my pocket. It wasn't long till I noticed everyone looking our direction. "What are they staring at?" I asked Sarah Jane. "You smell like a ham sandwich," she giggled. "What did you bring it in here for?" "Where was I supposed to put it?" I demanded. "Girls," Miss Gibson interrupted, "do you have a problem?" "No, ma'am," I replied. "I'm sorry." It seemed like a long time till dinner, and even I was beginning to get hungry just smelling Wesley's sandwich. At dinner time, we watched as Wesley ate his 1 sandwich, a piece of cake, and 2 apples. "I'll say this for him," Sarah Jane commented. "He certainly is good-natured. He hasn't said a word about your taking his sandwich." "Me?" I yelped. "What about you? You took one first." "That's true," Sarah Jane agreed. "But it was the one in your pocket that he smelled all morning. There were plenty of places out there to hide it. Why did you bring it in?" "Because I'm not as underhanded as you are," I replied bitterly. "Why do I always come out smelling like a ham sandwich, while you come out smelling like a rose?" "Good planning and organizational ability," Sarah Jane assured me. "We'll have to decide what we'll do next to help Wesley. Did you know he's wearing his pa's overalls because his own don't fit anymore? He really needs us, whether he knows it or not. That was a good idea you had to cut down on his food. Can you think of something else?" I glared at her. "If I do think of something, you'll be the last to know." "Don't be cross, Mabel," Sarah Jane said cheerfully. "I'll come to your rescue if you're ever run down by a steam engine." "That's a safe promise," I grumbled. "You just take care of your own dirty work from now on." Toward the middle of the afternoon, it began to turn quite warm. Miss Gibson opened the windows, but the soft spring day was more suited to dreaming than to studying. I was busy with my history when Sarah Jane poked me. She pointed at Wesley. He had given up all pretense of reading the book propped in front of him and was peacefully sleeping with his head on his arms. I watched in fascination as Sarah Jane quietly reached across her desk, unbuttoned the strap on Wesley's overalls, wrapped it around the post of his chair, and buttoned it back to his pants. Silently, she indicated that I was to do the same thing with the other strap. I shook my head. There was no way she could reach the strap on that side without standing up. Her eyes begged me to help her. Reluctantly, I leaned forward and wound the strap around his chair. Blissfully unaware, Wesley slept on. Sarah Jane's shoulders shook and her eyes watered with the effort to keep from laughing out loud. I turned my back to her. If she laughed, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep quiet. The scene we were imagining soon came to life. "All right, class," Miss Gibson's voice broke the silence. "It's time for the history test for the upper grades." Wesley sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Wesley, will you please pull up the map so everyone can see the questions on the board?" Wesley started to get up and then sat back down with a thump. Sarah Jane choked and clapped her hand over her mouth. "Wesley?" Miss Gibson gave him a strange look. "Are you coming?" Yes, ma'am." He tried to stand up. No, ma'am, I'm stuck." Miss Gibson came back to investigate. By this time the room was rocking with laughter, and Sarah Jane was bent over double and gasping for breath. Miss Gibson's lips twitched as she freed Wesley from his chair, but the look on her face said that we hadn't heard the last of this. As for Wesley, his usually cheerful face was beet red, and he looked as though he might cry. "I think we'll have the test on Monday," Miss Gibson announced. "It's such a beautiful afternoon, I'm going to let you go home early." except for Mabel and Sarah Jane. Will you girls stay for a few minutes, please?" "Ugh, we're in for it," Sarah Jane groaned. Miss Gibson was very stern. "Do you realize what humiliation you caused Wesley?" she asked. "There is nothing more cruel than taking away someone's self-respect in front of his friends. I suppose you were also the ones who took part of his dinner?" We nodded. "Would you walk into the Pattersons' home and steal food from their table?"
"Oh, no!" I gasped. "We didn't steal it."
"What else do you call it?" Miss Gibson asked. "I have never appreciated the teasing Wesley endures because of his weight, but this has gone beyond teasing. You have been mean to him. I think he deserves an apology."
"We like Wesley," Sarah Jane said miserably. "We just thought we'd help him lose a few pounds. I'm sorry, we didn't think about how he'd feel." "I am too," I said. "We'll go by there on the way home and ask him to forgive us. We'll never do that again, I promise."
"I'm sure you won't," Miss Gibson replied. She sighed and looked at the hole in Sarah Jane's stocking. "This has been a hard day for all of us, but if you've learned something about consideration for others' feelings, maybe it's been worth it." End of chapter 5.